Shalom, party people, and welcome to the 12th C. So, essential responder, 0 to hero in 2 days. If you are familiar with Refuge Medical, you are probably very familiar with the fact that they offer Refuge training. Currently, they have 5 classes in their lineup. They have a Stop the Bleed course, they have a CPR course, and both of those are very, very affordable classes. If I remember correctly, they are in that $100, $150 and less category. They're just a couple of hours worth of training, and that's enough training that can save your life, if not somebody else's life. They have 3 main classes that are kind of what springboarded their whole training, and they have a whole lot more classes coming down the pipeline in the foreseeable future. Their main classes are the Responder series, Responder 1, 2, and 3, and you can actually take all 3 courses in a 2-day period. Those courses are called the Essential Responder. And I just took the Essential Responder course the other day. It was the July 23 and 24 class in Pecola, Oklahoma. It was absolutely fantastic, and I am on record saying that the first hour of Responder 1 was worth the entire $1,400 paid for the 2 days worth of training. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that in just a minute. But before we go any deeper, let's lay out a couple of things. First off, a disclaimer. Bear Independent, the channel that has kind of started this all through Refuge Medical and the Refuge Training Series and Grindstone Ministries and Caleb House and all of that. I am a big fan of Bear Independent, and I think that's pretty obvious, the fact that my channel name is the 12th C Conditioning, and other videos that I have explaining that, and I shout out Bear Independent all the time, and I'm pretty sure like 3/4 of my followers are Bear Independent followers, so I don't think that's coming as news to anybody. I am a member of Bear Independent's Patreon. I have purchased several items from Refuge Medical, some at full price, some at discounts. I've had them do a little bit of custom kitting for me on a couple occasions. I haven't spent tons and tons of money with Refuge Medical, but I've spent more than just somebody who decided to check them out. I have donated, and I'm currently doing a fundraiser for Grindstone Ministries and Caleb House. So, I guess somebody could make the sunk cause fallacy argument, or the sunk cost fallacy argument towards me potentially shilling for Refuge Medical, Bear Independent, Caleb House, Refuge Training, any of that. And I want those people to know that I intentionally paid full price for the Essential Responder course. I have received no refund on that. I have asked for no refund because I believe that $1,400 paid for this last couple of days of training was 100% worth what I paid, and so much more. Knowing what I know now, I 100% agree with all of the individuals who are on record saying that honestly they should be charging more for what they're doing. There are multiple instructors for the period of the couple of days. There are multiple crisis actors that are part of the class. There are multiple oppositional forces that are part of the class. There are multiple individuals who are key factor in keeping things going for just the admin behind making the class run, and just getting all of the logistics, and just making sure that everybody has enough water. I think is probably a full-time job for these people, let alone the ins and outs of coordinating where the classes are going to be and how everything needs to go. So this is a guesstimation, but you're probably paying for about 10 to 15, wages for people for them to be full-time in Refuge training. And that's honestly saying something. So you break out for classes of a maximum of 15 people in the essential responder side of things, and in a lot of cases it's less. Plus, Bear is cycling some of his own people through his training, so they're not even getting the full price out of them. I believe they're coming in at whatever their people would pay. If you're the CEO and owner of a company, I don't know if you are actually paying for your own employees to go through things. That's probably just a perk of owning the company. Is, you know, it's just, hey, it is what it is. But I paid full price for this class, and I believe what I paid was 100% worth it. And like I said, I believe the first hour of the first class was well worth the $1,400. And let's get into that a little bit. So Responder 1 is a 4-ish, and they say 4, it's closer to 5-hour class. And this one is more classroom setting. Now, there is a lot of hands-on in Responder 1, but it is the most classroom textbook version of this whole training ordeal. And there's a lot of PowerPoint slides, and it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. In all honesty, they're covering a lot of information in that 4 hours. They're also getting some very, very heavy hands-on instruction. And why I say that the first hour is worth the entire price of the 2-day 3-class training schedule is because I have taken several Stop the Bleed courses. I've taken several CPR first aid AED courses. Not tons, and I don't come from a super high speed, ultra tactical background. I have worked in a correction setting, and I have assisted with security for the group that I fellowship with. And so on some things in doing that, I have received some very basic Stop the Bleed first aid CPR AED training. And I've only had one of those classes before this one that we actually took the tourniquets out of the wrapper and applied them. Now, the thing was, in that one where we did that, we did it one time. So I had at least received some instruction and knew how tight that tourniquets needed to be. And I have done my own training before ever taking this class on, okay, this is how I'm going to put the tourniquet on, and this is how tight it needs to be. And I check that I don't have a pulse when I do put the tourniquet on, and, we'll do push-ups and run with it. And so, I've had some level of inoculation to some of those things. And that is not required for doing Responder 1. You can literally know nothing about first aid CPR or, anything in that line, and they will take you from knowing nothing on the Stop the Bleed side, because they don't cover CPR in this course. But they will take you from literally knowing nothing of, what is a tourniquet, what is a Band-Aid, and school you up on how to effectively apply trauma medicine to prolong somebody's life long enough for a higher level of care to get to them, or for them to get to a higher level of care. We had people who struggled to open the tourniquets, let alone struggled to actually put them on. And at the end of Responder 1, let alone at the end of the first hour, they were proficiently putting them on. And that is why I believe that first hour was worth every penny paid, is because what is your life worth? And for knowing that you can apply a life-saving device to prolong your life long enough for you to get to a higher level of care, versus all these other Stop the Bleed courses that are out there that may not even have the liability insurance or the the guts to actually really show people how to do something that will save a life. I think is irresponsible of all these other courses, and Refuge is doing what I believe is the right thing and showing people this is truly how you do it, and giving them the kinesthetics behind it to actually learn and practice. We did have people who just took Responder 1. We had people who drove from like either Michigan or Minnesota. I can't remember which one of those two states, but we had people who drive from that far to take a 4 to 5 hour class and turn around and drive back, which was just amazing to me. I drove like 5 hours-ish to get there, and I was like, I'm driving this far, I'm saving for all of it. But that is what it is. Every hour of that first class was a ton of information, really, really good instruction. The instructors wanted us to ask questions, wanted us to get hands-on with things, wanted us to know what we needed to know, to where under pressure we were performing relatively well. it is an education and confidence booster is what the first, half of that first day is. That responder one is it's not just instruction, it is legit education behind doing what you need to do. Now, if you can't afford to go to responder one at the minimum, I would consider going to their Stop the Bleed course that they have there. For what that's worth, it's I think it's like a 2-hour class, and it's a little bit more basic, but it will be enough, in my opinion, to really educate you on how to prevent massive bleeding. And I think that is well worth it. And knowing Refuge is going to put their own spin on that, that's there. But if you can't do that, the trauma medicine playlist that Bear Independent has, and it's also on Refuge Medical, I will link it in the description for this video. Watch that multiple times, take notes. It will be well worth it. And that is instruction, or I am so sorry, that is information, not instruction. That watching a video will not teach you anything. It will give you a background knowledge. But if you have someone who is qualified to check your pulse and tell you if it's really there or not when you are putting a tourniquet on, that is step one. There are some good videos that will give you a very basic knowledge that you can figure some things out, but you really need to have your pulse checked by someone who, that's their job, to check pulses, whether they are an EMT or a nurse or a doctor, somebody to check up on your application of a tourniquet afterwards and tell you if you did it right or not. And then you need to do it like 10 or 20 more times after, until you are doing it regularly. At that point, you will have a pretty good baseline to where I think if you have a tourniquet, which you can pick up a good tourniquet from Refuge Medical for $30, and a pulse oximeter for like $40. So you're at $70 in to practice on your own of just how to put a tourniquet on. You can put them on your arms, you can put them on your legs, you can put them on other people, and just constantly check with a pulse oximeter that you're doing stuff right. That is some of the best training that you can get yourself into after receiving some good instruction on that. So if you wanted to go take their Stop the Bleed course and then follow up with a pulse ox and a tourniquet, it would be well worth it, I think, to go in and do that. I think that there's enough inexpensive training opportunities that you can take part in, that you don't necessarily have to do responder one if you can't afford it. But I would honestly tell people that the whole 2 days, all $1,400, was absolutely worth every penny. So if money is an issue and you really want to take these classes, I would reach out to Refuge Medical either through their email, admin@refugemedical.com, or for just calling the store and say, hey, look, I really want to take this class, and this is what my motivation is behind this, and my barrier is this, and I would like assistance in trying to make it happen. They're nice people there, and if you're nice to them, I wouldn't be shocked if there was something that they would help you out on. But I bootstrapped for this class for a while, and it was totally worth it. Responder 2. Responder 2 is less classroom time and more repetition and instruction and scenarios. There's a little bit of classroom time where they're going in and they're reviewing some stuff, but I took a metric ton of notes in Responder 1. I maybe took a page or two of notes in Responder 2. Responder 2 was mostly on your feet, moving, and doing scenarios and drills, and they were making us do PT. We were working up a good sweat for a long time, and we were having to do tourniquet applications and wound packing under stress. We were having to put chest seals on under stress. They made sure that we could do things right. There were a couple of scenarios that I am not going to go into because I tell you what, it's kind of like Fight Club. There's 2 rules for Fight Club, and you don't talk about them. And I know I just broke those because I talked about that, but I'm definitely not going to break Refuge's scenario setups. I'm sure if you did enough Googling and you just really, really read into a lot of situations, you might be able to figure out a couple of things, but I doubt it. To be all honest, I really did look to see what was out there, and I was still very surprised by the scenarios that were there. The scenarios that are there, are they theoretically winnable? Yeah. But if you're going in with the mindset of I'm just going to kick butt and take names, you're going to have your myopic paradigms just shattered, because there are so many ways to fail in these scenarios that there are definitely less bad ways of handling them, and I do think that there probably is a way to win, but where I think the real winning is actually finding where your shortcomings are, so you know what to train for. And there's also the winning of knowing that you can confidently apply aid to yourself or to somebody else in a very, very short period of time under duress, which is awesome. There are some big mistakes that I made in the scenarios that I was in, and 100% own those mistakes. That being said, those mistakes, I learned far, far more from those mistakes than the successes that I had in other trainings that weren't done by Refuge, because those other trainings were false senses of success. I really did try to come in with an open mind and without an attitude of, I know all this, because I'll say the trauma medicine playlist that is on Bear and Refuge's channels, it covers the basic information that is covered in Responder 1, but it does not cover the depth that is in Responder 1. So the Responder 2 side of actually getting the physically demanding aspect, and then the application of aid under relatively good simulated duress, is pretty good. There was a moment in Responder 2 that I honestly forgot that I wasn't in Responder 3 yet. I was like, oh, we've got a full day of this tomorrow, it's going to get worse. And the ability to get smoke checked where you're just not far from condition black, because that's their goal, is to push you very, very close to that line, so that way they can see how you react in those situations and then tailor your training to that. The instructors are very, very good about working with you on stuff. There is nothing that they throw at you that you did not receive full instruction on how to care for, and it's just a lot of times that stuff goes in one ear and out the other, and you will revert to your level of training that you already have. The failures that I had in those scenarios, I learned so much from. I'll get into this a little bit more, but if I didn't have the failures that I had, then I don't think I would have had the epiphany that I had at the end of training, and just has caused me to want to go and train more and get better, not so I can come back and dominate those scenarios again in the near future. It's so that way that I am as equipped as possible to care for the people that I love, and that's the ultimate goal. So Responder 3 is an 8-ish, it's really like 10 to 11 hours of just an intense day. Class started at 7 a.m. and it was drinking from a fire hose until honestly about 6 p.m. and that was with lunch. The lunch was really the only protected time in Responder 3. Everything else, whether it was a potty break or just classroom instruction or whatever, which classroom instruction was not sit down classroom time. It was, all right, everybody, we're going on a field trip. Every bit of Responder 3 that was not lunchtime was solid instruction. And that's whether we were in the mud pit, whether we were in a high intense scenario, whether we were just standing around and catching our breath, whatever, everything was instruction. and I seriously do respect that. There was more downtime than I expected in Responder 3. Now, part of that was the heat. They were seeing all the signs of heat stress on us. They were seeing very, very close signs of heat stroke in a couple of people, and so they were trying to make sure that they didn't lose anybody to heat stroke. And I really respect that about the instructors, but at the same time, there were parts of me that wanted to be pushed a little harder, and then other parts of me that were like, you know what, they've actually gotten me pushed as far as I need to be pushed on this area, because elevated heart rate under stress, lots of sweat, lots of, oh, hey, my brain's not working at full function, and now I'm having to do things that, I thought I could do, and then realizing that I'm fumbling in these areas, and was very, very eye-opening. So I hear that the winter Responder 3 course is harder, and that's because you're inside more, and so they're not worried about heat stroke. For what that's worth, I made the comments like, hey, I was honestly expecting that there was going to need to be even more PT in this, because they do tailor the physical demands of the whole course, not just Responder 3, to the individual fitness level of that person. I had people in my class who probably didn't PT once a month. Definitely didn't PT a ton before this class. And then I had people in this class like me that were PT studs, and I don't consider myself a PT stud, but when I run marathon distances, and this is my third cycle of 75 hard, I guess I'm doing more than your average Joe, but I had the realization that I don't PT enough during this class. So I think my endurance was fine, but I need to do more strength training. I had a scenario where I was carrying a 91 pound sandbag that wasn't full of sand, it was full of gravel. And because of my pride, I intentionally carried it for basically the whole exercise, minus one little bit where I had a dude try to buddy carry it with me. And I was like, you know what, in all honesty, I got this, man. Just help me get it back up on my shoulders, and you just watch my 6 and I'll let you know if I need help. And because of that, I found out that I was moving too slow, and so I was in the sights of the enemy multiple times, for long enough that if the enemy had decided that today was the day, then today would have been the day. So I should have swallowed my pride and just passed it off to other people and stayed fresh. One of the instructors was like, dude, you are not carrying that bag back. Somebody else is going to do it. And I thanked him for that, even though I wanted to carry it back. I wanted to prove that I was tough enough to do it. But I'm sure my face was obvious that I was gassed. So I did get gassed several times. It just wasn't a constant gassing, which I guess is what I had mentally built myself up to think that it was going to be. It was just a 10-hour marathon. But they did single me out for extra PT, so it wasn't like I got the same that the people who never PT got. But their goal is to just get your heart rate up to that, condition black level, and then they're gonna stress you past that, and then find out where you fail. So if you never PT, you'll just get there quicker. But if you PT like I do, then they'll find whatever your breaking point is, and then they'll push you over the edge, and then take you back and build you up from there to where you need to be. There's some tactical scenarios in Responder 3. There are some scenarios that are more personal and less tactical, and then there are some scenarios where there's some things that are combined, and there are group scenarios and individual scenarios. And I will tell you that every scenario that was done was its own challenge, and the mistakes that were made, they were not forgotten about, and they were driven home. Hey, here is what you need to do, and how you need to fix these things, because if you don't fix these things, you will not improve in these areas, and we want you to improve. But for what that's worth, the Responder 3 class was absolutely awesome. You finish Responder 3, you get this patch They do not sell this patch that you have to earn it. You know, it's cool. I didn't do it for a patch, but I like it. And it says, "Hurry up, you're dying." And that's something that they say several times in the class. And it's not the reminder that you're going to bleed out if you don't get a tourniquet applied in a certain amount of time. It's actually the reminder that you will eventually die. And what are you doing with that time? You know, you may not get to decide how much time you've got left, but you do get to decide how that time's going to be spent. And make it count. Make every second that you have left on this earth count. And that's the real message that's behind Responder 3 is make it worthwhile. Not just a great one, but make it to where it heavily impacts other people in a very, very positive way. And that was a cool lesson. Some things I liked about the class. The pressure of accountability from the very beginning of Responder 1. They wanted to make sure that you knew how to apply aid and not just, this is a Band-Aid, this is a tourniquet, but we're not going to take it out of the wrapper, folks. It was rock solid. And even if that class was 1 hour, it was worth every penny of that and more. The instructors provided serious opportunities for us to fail and then to learn from those failures. They gave us real feedback on how to improve. All of the answers were given in advance. However, our paradigms were broken because we just didn't pay attention. We did pay attention, but we didn't take those lessons to heart. And that's part of the instruction is, here's what, is coming up. They don't tell you the exact, but they tell you, what you need to know. And, people still revert back to what their, levels of training or lack thereof are. The PT and stress inoculation that was there was phenomenal. There were times where I was like, man, this sucks. And then there were other times where it's like, this is fantastic. The instructors were harsh, but they were not degrading. They were not calling us mean names. They weren't, saying that we were worthless or anything like that. They were building us up. Now, they were screaming at us and they were like, hey, why did you mess up in this way? You all failed this. This is what happens when people fail, is that people die. And there was weight behind what they were saying, but it was not the, hey, you insert 4-letter word, you're a terrible person, you'll never amount to anything. It was none of that. It was just, hey, listen, if you want to succeed, this is how you are going to do it. And we are not going to let you fail. We're not going to give this to you. We are going to make sure that you are coached up until you are rock solid. And that was fantastic. The actors, the crisis actors, specifically, there's 2 that I've got in mind who, whatever awards are given out for crisis actors, that were very believable. There was one gentleman who he really made me believe that he was who he was pretending to be, and that's saying something for sure. And then there's a young woman who is the spouse of one of the lead trainers, and she handles a lot of the admin behind Refuge Training, and she is a phenomenal actress. My gosh, I believed her in every role that she was in. There was one scenario on the first day who she just played the right part, and then there was a couple of scenarios on the second day where she played a very, very wide range of characters. She was a threat in one, and she was not a threat in the other. And when she was a threat, I seriously believed she was a threat. And when she was not a threat, I seriously believed that she was a legitimate casualty. And she was very good at her job. And the gentleman from the first day, who was part of the second day of training as well, he was, if he wasn't every bit as good of an actor, he was for sure close. He was very good at his job too. Both of those actors were very, very believable. And the rest of the people who were crisis actors did a phenomenal job too. It's just those 2 specifically stood out. I also liked how they equipped us to go home and train others. I've already shown my wife a couple of things, and she's not, completely novice, but I've never had her apply a tourniquet yet. And there's some personal reasons behind that right now, but she's gotten pretty good in a very short period of time of applying them to me, and that is phenomenal. So I talked about this a little bit, but the Fight Club rules of keeping the scenario secret, for how hard I looked to, just find out, hey, what am I getting myself into? I am amazed at how tight-lipped people have been about the scenarios that are in this, and so I'm going to continue that tradition and not break any code of conduct for sharing those. If you want to find out what those scenarios are, you need to go take them for yourself, because if I were to tell you what they were, that would really take away from your experience of learning from the failures. The other thing is that the scenarios change. The scenarios that they're running today are not the scenarios that they were running 3 weeks ago, 6 months ago. I actually had the privilege of speaking with somebody high up in the company, and the final scenario for sure can actually go many, many, many different directions. And a lot of it is just timing and then how you respond to them on an individual level. I also respect how the course material updates. There was an update in between the last class that they did and this class that I took. And that one was kind of interesting. The only way I'd heard about it was in an interview of one of the instructors on a different YouTube channel. He had mentioned in passing that they had upgraded or updated their course material from the March E algorithm to the S March E algorithm, which the S is scene safe, or scene safety. So scene safety, massive bleeding, airway, respiration, circulation, head injury, hypothermia, hypertension, that kind of thing on the H, and then E for everything else, which you're just going back and you're checking stuff. And there's a whole lot of really good videos on the March algorithm that's out there. So my likes on that, I think there's a whole lot more that I liked about the course, but those are some things just that I've got in my notes that were kind of on the top of my head. Some, I guess, critiques of the course, and I don't have many, but I wish that they had stressed a little bit more on actually using personal protective equipment when responding. And I get it, when seconds count. If somebody's life gets saved and I'm not wearing PPE, it's going to depend on the situation. I've responded in the past to drug overdoses where I was sure glad I was wearing gloves. And other than getting the person in the recovery position and getting them to immediate medical help past there wasn't a whole lot that could be done. But I think more stress in putting gloves on would have been appreciated. But I think due to the timing and our class size, I'm not sure how much of that they truly could have worked in. But for what it's worth, they talked about it. But actually talking about it versus doing it, if they'd made us put the gloves on 10 times before rendering aid in a few situations, it would have been nice. I would have appreciated a few more scenarios. I have no idea, absolutely no idea how they would have worked it in. But if they could have done 2 more scenarios in the time frame that was there, I think that would have been even cooler. But it is what it is. I do think the number of scenarios that they had were very appropriate for the information that I learned and for the I guess epiphanies that I had that just really have set my noggin spinning. So that is, in my opinion, worth what it is there for. But I do think it would have been cool to have a couple more scenarios. I just logistically, I don't know how they would have done it. The class would have to be longer. Or other con, there were 12 individuals in my class. And I liked the people that I was in the class with, but I honestly would have been glad to pay more if it had peaked at 8 people instead of 12, and I don't know how they do that. From everything I understand, Refuge Training actually doesn't make a lot of money anyway. I think they're basically operating at break even. So for them to have fewer people, the price would have to be increased, and that would mean people, if it's 8 instead of a max of 15, that would mean that people would potentially have to pay double. And I don't know how they would swing that, because there would just be so many people who I don't think would come because of, paying that much, but it'd be worth every penny or more. But those are some things that I've just been kind of chewing on. And I actually think those are the first times I'm bringing those up. I don't even think I said those to the instructors, just because I hadn't thought about them until now. But relatively minor cons for everything that is there. I think that the pros of everything that I learned, all of the stress inoculation, all of the areas that I know now where to go train, so that way I can be better for the future. Worth every penny. I would have gladly paid more knowing what I know now. If you want to go take these courses, some things that I would recommend for how to prepare. That trauma medicine series that I'm going to be linking in the description down here, you need to go watch it at least twice and take really good notes both times through. It's not a requirement. You can know nothing going in, but that trauma medicine playlist is a really, really good start, so that way you can go in there with some foundation, and I promise you will not have wasted time in Responder 1 knowing that playlist. I watched it a few dozen times and took notes, and I still learned so much in Responder 1 and took a ton of notes. So I don't think it's wasted time doing that playlist through a couple of times and just having really, really good notes through it. If you can, I would buy your own tourniquet in advance. You will get one at class. That's part of the price of admission, is that you get a trainer kit, which includes a trainer tourniquet. But I would buy your own tourniquet and start practicing with it. And if you can buy a tourniquet and a pulse oximeter, I would do that. Well worth it, but I would still invest in some time from a medical professional telling you if you have successfully cut off blood flow to your arms and legs when you are practicing with a tourniquet. And I would be very, very cautious and watch really good instructional videos. I would recommend ones from Refuge Medical for how to apply the medical equipment that you're purchasing, and it could save a life, so it's well worth it. I would recommend that you PT as much as possible. I would focus on strength and endurance, both, not one, both. I have focused on endurance, and I've been working on my strength, but just not near enough. Part of what I was talking about that 91-pound bag, it was the going up and down with it. I ruck march all the time with a 61-pound bag, and so going from 60 to 90 pounds was not that bad. It was there, but if I had to lay down flat, so that way enemy training fire wouldn't come our way and take us out, getting back up was a labor to do that, and I think it was worse than actually running with that bag. But it is what it is. But I would strength and endurance train as much as you can between now and when you ever go to class, so that way you will physically be a lot more capable of doing things. But it is what it is. Like I said, there were people in my class who did not physically train for the class, probably rarely ever did physically train. We had some people in their 50s take the class, and they did very, very well. I've heard of a guy in his 80s taking the class and just kicking butt and taking names. I know of 2 nursing mothers that have taken the class, one of which was in my class. And they rocked it, and 100% props. I can't imagine someone who is a few months postpartum going in and doing what we were doing. And the mother that was in my class, she nursed her baby, and she had a babysitter there to help her take care of her baby, but she nursed her baby in class, and 100% props to her for doing that kind of stuff. So it is very attainable. You don't have to be a PT stud. You don't have to be Captain America. You don't have to be, you know, super physically fit by any means. You'll just get more out of it if you're in as good a shape as you can be between now and whenever you go. Same thing with if you study up on the trauma medicine side of things as much as you can, the instructors can go deeper with you and you will get more. But even if you know nothing going in, you will learn so much. And then I encourage you to physically write down your reason for wanting to take this class and for wanting to get better at trauma medicine. Mine personally was my wife and kids, is my wife and kids. And it's not just that I want to make sure that they're safe, it's that I want to make sure that I'm safe to be able to take care of them. It's that I want to make sure that my kids grow up in a world that is worth living in and not just, you know, worse than when I found it. And if that is the possibility of buying somebody enough time to where their life is seriously extended, and then that person helps make the world a better place, then that's the goal. So some things that gave me a leg up in the course. I carried my holster, which is a concealed carry holster, and it's actually a rig. I'm going to do a further in-depth video on this, but this is the Filster Enigma, and this is a training weapon. This is not a live pistol by any means. It is basically a dummy pistol that has a laser attached to it. But the Filster Enigma, it's a chassis system, and this is the holster that is attached to it is a specific holster for this chassis, although there's a whole bunch of holsters that aren't made by Filster that will fit onto it. And when I took Responder 1 and 2, I had my everyday carry set up in it, which included this push dagger, this S-Mark, a live magazine, not a training magazine like this one, and then I had a SWAT T tourniquet, or no, I'm sorry, a soft T tourniquet attached to it with 2 rubber bands, just one broke. And for Responder 3, I had to remove the knife and the pistol and the magazine for that, and that's understandable. They don't want live fire, they don't want live ammunition in the course, and I 100% understand that, and that's because there's training fire that goes off with it, with sim rounds, with blank firing adapters, and with just plain blue guns, sometimes airsoft pistols, depending on what's going on. I'm going to do a more in-depth review on this holster in another video, but I reached out to the trainers and was just like, hey, I want to pressure test my system. May I wear this holster in training? I understand that you guys use this type of training firearm in the course, and my holster theoretically is compatible with that. May I wear it during training if I obviously leave the firearm somewhere safe that is not part of the course for, you know, places that it doesn't need to be. And they were 100% cool with that. They're like, we're going to wand you and just make sure that you don't come with anything sharp or anything that goes bang. And I understand that. And this holster held up like a champ. And there's a few situations where you will be handed training weapons, and having a way to stow it for when you're not actively using it is so worth it, because needing your hands to do medical is fantastic. That if you have them both, there were people who were putting training pistols in, you know, belt lines, who were trying to put them in pockets, who were putting them on the ground, and there's just nothing like having a holster. And I had some pretty cool things confirmed for me, and some pretty cool things, you know, myopic paradigm shattered as well with this holster system. But one thing, I was actually pleased with my ability to re-index into the holster a couple of times and then safely draw back out very quickly and do what I needed to do in training under stress, which was cool. But the other part of it too was the fact that this holster survived through the mud, through the physically demanding day, and if it survived that, it'll survive anything, which was super cool. And I'll go much more in depth on that in the future on another video that I will link in the description when that's done. I recommend some kind of pouch. Currently in the course on day 2, they will give you the outer pouch for a bare minimum IFAC, and that's rock solid. They've been going through several classes, and they're, other than them being a little bit dirty, you wash the dirt off, they look like they're brand new, which is super cool and says that the quality material that they're making is seriously there. I don't know if you should buy the guts to that bare minimum or the inner bag that would go with it, if that would help. But I would recommend having a pouch to hold your gear that is purpose built for what you need. And I would also honestly recommend like a tourniquet pouch. I know Cody at Surgeon Gear makes a pretty good tourniquet pouch that interfaces with that Cat Gen 7 very, very well. It also works with the Soft T Wide. So it's something that you might look into, and tourniquet pouches are pretty cheap. So buying a dedicated pouch, because for the first day, there's a few instances where having that is well worth it. If you can't do that, definitely some really good cargo pants with some good cargo pockets do go a long way. But I had a cheap little throwaway pouch that just barely fit everything but the tourniquet that came in the trainer kit. And it was very, very useful for me the first day. And then when the bare minimum outer pouch came available, it was a game changer for sure. And I had a little tourniquet carry pouch that I ended up throwing away at the end of the day, because the one I had was made in China, and the one that Cody at Sojourn Gear makes is substantially better. I would recommend going that way, and I'll link that down in the description too. What gave me a really good leg up was I was able to pressure test my everyday carry setup, which I small of the back carry a Soft T Wide tourniquet, and that gave me a second tourniquet for the class, which was super helpful. I highly recommend pressure testing your everyday carry, and it will show you some things, good and bad, about it. And then PT as much as you can. I ruck weekly. I run all the time. I'm trying to do as many push-ups and pull-ups as my body will allow me to right now, and definitely more so now. But yeah, I would PT as much as you can. I would focus on strength and endurance, both. I would focus on endurance in strength, and I would focus on strength in endurance. So, run long distances, especially with hills in mind. And then, even if it's a mile, just get it done. And I would also focus on, body weight calisthenics, push-ups, pull-ups. If you can get a bag and throw some weight in it and walk around with it, it'll really, really matter in the long run, I think. Some things I wish I had for the class. I tell you, a good pair of cargo pants with knee pads built into the cargo pants. There were some people in my class and several of the instructors who had cargo pants with knee pads, and I was like, man, that sure would be nice. I personally would recommend having a little bit more medical gear on you. I would recommend having an extra tourniquet. It would seriously go a long way if you could have an extra tourniquet and maybe an extra set of gauze and an extra pressure bandage and an extra chest seal. So just buying 2 of the trainer kits. So the one that you get free in the class, and then buying another one because that would just give you extra material to work with. It would have been nice to have an extra kit. Honestly, I should have prepped even more for physical fitness. Not saying that that I wasn't physically fit enough for it, but everybody in my class was like, "Man, we need to train more." It's like, "Yep, I need to train more too, 100%." Yeah. So I need to train more in push-ups with my rucksack, because that would give me a 61-pound on my back while I do push-ups. I need to train more in tourniquet application, specifically one-handed tourniquet applications in the dark and on myself and on other people. I need to train more on manual pressure. I need to train more on wound packing and I definitely need to train more on evacuating the casualty off of the X. Those are all things that I needed to do and things that I need to do better at. I've known about box breathing for a long time, and that's the, in, hold, out, hold. I've known about that for a long time, and I did not apply it properly in the class, and so I need to work on that a whole lot more. And then I also need to keep my head on a swivel. I get tunnel vision really, really bad, and box breathing with moving your head around on a swivel, your eyes up and down, and looking as much as you possibly can, it really breaks you out of tunnel vision. And I've known about that. I just did not apply it like I needed to. So those are some areas that I definitely will be training a whole lot more. I will take this class again. I was honestly on the fence about whether or not I was going to be putting my wife through the entire course. I was like, oh yeah, she could definitely do Responder 1, and it sure would be nice if she'd do Responder 2, that'd be great, but I'm not going to force her to do Responder 3 or anything like that. Took this class, yep, she's doing it all now, and she's actually pretty excited from what I can tell, and she's taken to the training that I'm sending her way like a duck to water, and my goal is to not share with her any of the scenarios, but definitely to help her know what she is very capable of even before she goes, so that way when she goes she can learn a ton more and just be a force to be reckoned with when she gets out of this training. I mean what I say when I've titled this 0 to Hero in 2 days. This training will take someone who knows nothing about taking care of people medically, and will get them to the point where they can render aid successfully in a bad situation. I'm going to have some reviews of the jeans that I wore throughout that actually held up, but I'm just going to keep them as work pants from here on out. This Filster Enigma, I'm going to have a review on that. The little push dagger that I've got on my holster, I'm going to have a review of that. I'm going to have a review of the Cat Gen 7 tourniquet, not just the one that I got in the training, but I'm going to have a full review on my thoughts on Cat Gen 7s, which are good tourniquets. Also the Soft T Wide, which is my EDC tourniquet, I'm going to have some thoughts on that in a review video. I'm going to give my thoughts on my S-Mark bandage. The shoes that I wore, I am going to give a review on those. Those were the Merrill Vapor Glove 6s, and I had fully worn those out, and the intention was that class was going to be their last hurrah, and they performed well, but it was time to retire them at the end of the class, and I knew that going in, and they had like 650 miles on them from training, so it was well timed. That was physical training leading up to Essential Responder, so it was well timed for those running shoes to be retired. But for what that's worth, in conclusion, I 100% recommend Essential Responder. I find a way to bootstrap the cash and go. If there's anything holding you back from going, I would call the Refuge store, or I would email admin@refugemedical.com and just be like, hey, I really want to take this class, and this is my barrier for entry, and just see what they can do for you. They may just say, well, that sucks, I'm sorry, or they may say, hey, this is what we can do for you, which may be able to meet you part of the way there. But I 100% believe that this class is worth it. Go take the Essential Responder. And with that, go do hard things.